Hey, what's already? Welcome back to News Toast, and my voice has taken a bit of a turn today. Like I said earlier in the week, I am a little bit under the weather. I do apologize about that, and if my voice cracks, that's the reason why, but I had to come on here today because a major story just broke online, and I'd also say a really frustrating one at that. Xbox Game Pass, unfortunately, is the latest product to raise in price, and there's a lot to say about this one. On the channel, I've often championed this service because I truly do believe that it's one of the only consumer-friendly services that we have in the game industry. But are we now getting to a point that that narrative is simply false? So that is something that we're going to talk about today, plus plenty more. First, though, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. Thank you just so much for what you do, and you will receive this video through early access. Let's go and get right to things, though, starting off with a game that I've actually been very optimistic about, being Digimon Time Stranger. I do have a soft spot for the Digimon franchise because I grew up with this series. It's a top 5 IP from my childhood alongside Pokemon and Dragon Ball. And the thing is that growing up, even though the anime was really good, the games, on the other hand, were, I'd say very hit or miss. So when I saw Time Stranger and the effort that they were putting into this specific title, I immediately thought to myself that this here looks like the game that I always dreamt about when I was a kid. Really my only gripe is that it's locked to 30 frames per second, which I still think is absolutely ridiculous, but it will be out this week, and reviews are now rolling in. And I'm happy to say that it's the highest rated Digimon game ever made. Yeah, it currently has a 78 overall score on Metacritic and an 81 on OpenCritic. Now, from what I've seen, the big complaint that some reviewers have is with its dungeon designs, it being a little bit repetitive at times, and it being linear. But Digimon fans specifically seem to adore this game. The story sounds really good, and the monster designs, including their animations, are absolutely amazing. I'm also hearing that it's just a really good RPG in general. So, if you're a Digimon fan, or even if you're not, this seems like a really enticing game. In fact, Bandai Namco reported that its pre-orders have exceeded their expectations, and that the physical release will be scarce upon launch because of that. So this is all fantastic news for the Digimon series, and it very well could convince Bandai Namco to continue with more high-effort Digimon games like Time Stranger. Now, we also got a follow-up story for the EA acquisition because a new report came out claiming that multiple sources within Bioware have expressed their concern about potential layoffs and maybe even worse. And I have to say, as soon as I saw the EA acquisition, that was really one of the first things that I thought about, because Bioware has not produced a successful game in a very long time. It's really been over a decade by this point, which is really kind of crazy to think about for a modern AAA studio like this. These games are very expensive to make, so you have to produce success. But instead, their last 3 games includes Mass Effect Andromeda, Anthem, and then last year's Dragon Age: The Veilguard. And that's the thing for me about BioWare, and really for any studio for that matter. As I've gotten older, I've kind of learned that studios are only names, and it's really the people that makes them. And the truth is that BioWare, they're not the same company that they were back in the 2000s. Yes, they still work on the same IP, but they're also a very different studio, and a big part of that is because the same people just aren't working there anymore. And I say all that because I think they're rightfully concerned about their studio. Again, 3 high-profile failures in a row is a major problem for a modern AAA company. So, no, it wouldn't shock me at all if they specifically are put under a microscope given the cost of this acquisition. Now, I still believe that they won't close down BioWare because they are working on Mass Effect 4. So my belief is that they'll afford BioWare the time to release that game. But at the same time, the future of that studio very well might rely on the success of Mass Effect 4. So BioWare has to be extra sure to deliver a product that fans will actually like instead of doing what they've been doing with their past 3 games. Now, before we get into the controversial Xbox story, I do actually have a bit of good news here, because it sounds like Prototype could be making a return sometime in the future. Of course, Microsoft now owns Activision, and so they want to utilize their IP when they can. I mean, it kind of reminds me of the Embracer Group and what they're doing with Crystal Dynamics. You know, they've been remastering a lot of their old games, like Tomb Raider and Soul Reavers. I mean, it's really just easy money at the end of the day, and I mean, it kind of sounds like Microsoft wants to do something similar with Prototype. Now, the reason for that is because it was discovered through a recent data mine on the Steam release that the end credits has been updated to include Iron Galaxy. Now, do kind of keep in mind that Xbox has already worked with Iron Galaxy a few different times, including on Killer Instinct, and also on the recently released Tony Hawk 3 Plus 4 remake. And the latter of the two kind of does showcase their ability to do remaster specifically. So to put them on another Activision-based IP doesn't really seem to be too far-fetched. Now, do kind of keep in mind that this is only a rumor for the time being, but I definitely think that this would be cool to see. I mean, personally, I always leaned more towards Infamous when Prototype originally released back on the Xbox 360, but it is still a very unique series that I think has a lot of potential. I mean, there's a lot of modern-day superhero games, but I kind of miss the days when we got games like Prototype and Infamous, which are game-created superheroes. I mean, I just think that they're a lot more original for the game space, in my opinion. All right, so let's just go ahead and get into the big story of the day, and yeah, I'd say this one is a little bit frustrating. I mean, if it wasn't bad enough that Xbox already raised the price of their consoles twice this year, not once, but yes, twice, they've now also raised the price for Xbox Game Pass, also twice since last September. This time, however, I'd say is a lot worse. Now, they're trying to ease the pain with some extra benefits, which I'm going to get into all that in just a moment, but I'd also say, are these extra benefits worth the additional asking price, considering it is so significant? And I think that's very questionable, to say the least. First, though, let's just kind of go ahead and get into the new prices. So like I said, last year, they rose the price by $3, but this time they are going the extra mile because they are raising the price by $10. Yes, Xbox Game Pass Ultimate will now cost $30 a month. I mean, you can see their new chart here, which right away, if there's a chart involved, that's usually not a great sign, but anyways, they'll now have 3 tiers. There's Essential, which will cost $10 a month. And let me say something about that just real quick. So if we rewind back to 2021, you might remember that Xbox tried to raise the price for Xbox Live Gold to $120 a year. However, fans pushed back in a pretty major way until they eventually backtracked. And the reason I bring all that up is because the Essential tier is basically that, with a few extras. It's also $120 a year. So ultimately, Xbox still found a way to move to that $120 a year price. Which here's my thing about that. Console gaming requires a subscription to play online games, which is still absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you don't have to do that on PC, which is all the more reason that PC gaming is booming right now, whereas console gaming has become a little bit more stagnant this generation. But yeah, to have the cheapest tier, which is required for online gaming, to cost double of what it did just 4 years ago, I find absolutely absurd. I mean, you can defend that if you want, but I think that this is flat out a terrible deal. Now, to be completely fair, the way Xbox Game Pass Core worked, which is basically what Essential is, you could subscribe for $60 a year or for $10 a month. So maybe they'll do the same for Essential, but currently they haven't clarified that in today's report. So we will have to wait for that information, and depending on what they say, could change my initial thoughts about this price. However, the next tier is Premium, and this will include 200 plus games for $15 a month. This is basically for anybody who wants a large library of games, but maybe doesn't necessarily care about day one releases. So for Forza Horizon 6 as one such example, that won't launch into the Premium tier, but instead, it'll come at a later date, maybe a year or so later. Then the Ultimate Edition, and this is the one that fans are so upset about because it just received a significant price hike. Instead of last year's $3 price hike, they went ahead and went with a $10 price increase. So yeah, it's now $30 a month. Now, they announced some extra benefits, including some Ubisoft Plus Classics and Fortnite Crew, which technically, I mean, that does lean into the idea of raising the price because Fortnite Crew on its own costs $12 a month. However, unless you're actually interested in Fortnite or Ubisoft Plus in this case, then this won't be worth the extra asking price. So to me, and this is just my opinion, but this seems like a forced addition that a lot of Game Pass subscribers personally weren't asking for. I mean, maybe there's some overlap with each one of these services, but I think most people would have instead preferred them all to stay separate. I mean, $30 a month is certainly a much tougher ask than $20. And let me just put that into perspective. Day one games for Game Pass has always been the big selling point. But let me ask you this. How many games do you actually play through Game Pass on a monthly basis? I mean, games are a big-time investment. And the reason that I'm asking that is because at $30 a month, especially for smaller games, why not just go ahead and buy the games that you want? So Hollow Knight Silksong is one such example. That launched in the Game Pass last month. But the thing about that game is that it's $20. So now it would just be cheaper to buy Silksong than to subscribe to Game Pass Ultimate. And a lot of games that are in Game Pass falls into that category. Now, at the same time, I still think that Game Pass will offer a good deal for specific months and for specific games. I mean, if you look at this year, they've had some big inclusions like Avowed, Tony Hawk, Doom the Dark Ages, Oblivion, the upcoming Call of Duty, and even Expedition 33. So for those specific months, Game Pass is still very enticing. And next year, they will have some big months with games like Halo, Gears, Forza, and Fable. But again, at $30 a month, I don't know if we can necessarily say the same thing for months that don't include those big-time releases. And that means that there is less incentive to stay subscribed every single month, like we currently have been. Now with the new prices, I can instead see customers buy into a month here, into a month there, but not necessarily full-time. Again, I'm not going to say that it's a terrible deal because I don't necessarily believe that. I think that if you really like Xbox IP, then it'll ultimately pay for itself in a year's time as they release their games. But it's definitely no longer a guarantee that you're just automatically going to save money. So yes, I do think that this is very unfortunate news. Let me know what you all think about this though. Do you think the new price is worth it, or is it just too high now? Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this video. Again, I do apologize for my voice. Hopefully it wasn't too bad, but hopefully I'll start to feel better tomorrow. Until then, though, subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.